void trembled. A darkness, deeper than the coldest abyss, moved across the stars. It did not creep. It did not expand. It devoured. No, the ancient horror, the god before gods, drifted to the fabric of the universe. His very presence an offense to existence. He had carved his name into the bodies of fallen celestials, had molded the first symbiotes from his own abyssal flesh, and had seen the birth of light as a mistake that needed to be undone. And now, his attention turned to Asgard, far beyond the 9 realms. Atop the golden throne of Asgard, Odin watched. His single eye, as ancient as the cosmos itself, burned with the weight of knowledge. He had sensed the shifting energies long before the first ripples of darkness approached his domain. This was no ordinary war, no conflict against frost giants or mad titans. This was primal, the collision of forces that predated time itself. He rose from his throne, clad in shimmering armor that had withstood the fury of countless foes. Gungnir, his mighty spear, hummed with celestial power, ready to pierce the heart of any who dared challenge the All-Father. The air around him crackled as he gathered the Odin force, his divine essence manifesting in golden streaks that lit the grand hall of Valistjaf. Then, the skies darkened. The stars were swallowed. A shadow deeper than night loomed at the edges of existence, and from it, Knull emerged. His form was both solid and liquid, an ever-shifting amalgamation of cosmic horror. The necrosword, his unholy blade, dripped with the essence of slain gods. He did not speak, for he had no need to. His purpose was absolute obliteration. Odin stepped forward, his voice booming through the vast expanse of space. "No," he intoned, his words woven with the weight of divinity. "You tread where you should not." Knull did not answer. Instead, he lifted the necrosword and the war began. The clash of gods began with the silence of the void breaking into chaos. Knull, a being of pure darkness, lifted the necrosword, and reality itself seemed to tremble in recognition of its wielder. A blade that felt celestials and torn through the fabric of creation now pointed at Odin. There was no need for words, only destruction. With a motion both fluid and violent, Knull swung the sword and the void screamed. The very essence of his strike was nothingness, a force that did not cut but rather erased. Space itself split apart, and black tendrils of a symbiotic corruption followed, stretching across the battlefield like an infestation. The first wave of darkness rushed toward Odin, each strand writhing with malevolent intent, seeking to consume him whole. Odin stood firm, the golden glow of the Odin force radiating from his being. As the abyssal tendrils reached him, he unleashed a burst of celestial fire, a purging force that met the encroaching darkness with righteous fury. The black tendrils recoiled, shriveling upon contact with the divine blaze. But Knull did not stop. Instead, he pressed forward, slicing through the golden fire with the necrosword, parting it as if it were mere mist. The All-Father's eye narrowed. He had battled giants, demons, and creatures of the underworld, but this was something more, something ancient and terrifying in a way that even he could not fully comprehend. He lifted Gungnir, his mighty spear, and thrust it forward, its tip glowing with raw cosmic energy. The impact shattered the silence of space, sending out a shockwave that rippled across the battlefield like the birth of a new star. Knull barely shifted, his body fluid yet unyielding. The spear struck true, piercing his torso, but where blood should have spilled, there was only darkness, a void that swallowed the wound before it could linger. He reached down and grasped the shaft of the spear, and for the first time in eons, Odin felt resistance. The god of the symbiotes grinned, a hollow, humorless expression. His grip tightened, and in a single motion, he wrenched Gungnir aside, sending Odin staggering back. The shift in balance was momentary, but that was all Knull needed. The necrosword came down in an arc of absolute ruin, and Odin barely had time to react. Raising his arm, he conjured a shield of pure Odin force, a barrier strong enough to withstand the storms of Muspelheim. The dark blade met the golden light, and for a moment, the universe held its breath. The impact sent cracks through space itself, fissures of black and gold splintering outward as the sheer force of collision threatened to unmake the very battlefield they stood upon. But Knull was relentless. He pressed forward, pushing the necrosword against Odin's shield, the edge of the blade biting deeper into the divine energy. The All-Father gritted his teeth, his godly strength holding firm, but he knew this was not sustainable. Knull was not merely wielding a weapon. He was channeling the void itself, and the void was infinite. Summoning his power, Odin threw his weight into the counterattack, expanding the barrier outward in a blinding explosion of energy. The force erupted like a dying sun, sending Knull hurling backward to the abyss, his form twisting and stretching as he absorbed the impact. For the first time since the battle began, there was silence. The battlefield, an expanse of cosmic nothingness, had been scarred. The clash of their forces had left ripples in the void, fractures in reality itself. Odin straightened, his breath steady but his mind racing. Knull had taken the full force of his energy blast, yet he could feel no weakness in the darkness before him. The void had absorbed the blow, and as the dust of the shattered dimension settled, Knull rose once more, the necrosword glistening in his grip. The All-Father tightened his grasp on Gungnir. He had fought countless battles, but something within him whispered that this was different. The true war had only just begun. Odin knew he could not allow Knull to dictate the battle. The All-Father had spent eons perfecting the art of war, and if there was one lesson he had learned, it was this. Power without strategy is nothing more than reckless destruction. Knull fought like a force of nature, unrelenting, inexorable, but Odin was not simply a warrior. He was a king, a tactician, and a god who had ruled over Asgard for millennia. Gathering his strength, Odin lifted Gungnir high, and the spear ignited with celestial power. The void around him trembled as a divine essence expanded, a golden light pushing back the darkness. Then, with a single motion, he hurled the spear with the force of a dying star. The weapon streaked through the abyss, leaving behind a trail of shimmering radiance. Knull, unfazed, raised a necrosword to intercept, but the spear was not merely an instrument of war. It was an extension of Odin's very will. As it neared its target, the golden light around it exploded outward, branching into hundreds of spears, each infused with enough power to level entire realms. Knull reacted instantly, slashing through barrage with swift, deadly precision. His blade cleaved through dozens of projectiles, annihilating them before they could strike. But the assault was overwhelming. Some of the divine weapons found their mark, piercing his form, embedding themselves in his shifting flesh like shards of burning light. The void god staggered, his tendrils writhing as the celestial energy burned through his essence. It was not pain. Knull did not experience pain in the way mortals or even gods did, but it was an affront to his very being. He could feel the light eating away at the darkness, a force that opposed his very existence. But Knull was not merely darkness. He was the origin of it, and darkness in its truest form is endless. With a low growl that reverberated across the battlefield, he reached into his own body and tore the spears free. Flinging them aside, his tendrils of abyssal matter sealed the wounds instantly. The celestial fire flickered and died, snuffed out as though it had never existed. Odin narrowed his eye. He had expected this. The true test was yet to come. Raising his arms, he called upon the storm, an ancient force woven into the very fabric of his being. The skies above, if they could be called skies, split open, and from the void beyond, a tempest unlike any before it descended. Divine lightning crackled in waves, forming a maelstrom of raw power, its golden tendrils lashing out like the wrath of an angry cosmos. Knull stood still, watching. His grip on the necrosword tightened. Then the storm struck. The storm raged, divine lightning crashing down with unrelenting fury. Odin stood amidst the chaos, his form illuminated by the golden radiance of his unleashed power. The very fabric of the void trembled as the All-Father summoned the full might of the Odin force, a power beyond mortal comprehension. The tempest engulfed Knull, searing through the abyssal god's essence, forcing the darkness to retreat in flickering waves. But Knull was not so easily undone. The god of the abyss let out a silent command, and the necrosword, glistening with cosmic death, drank in the storm. The tendrils of blackness expanded, absorbing the divine energy like a bottomless chasm. What Odin sought to destroy, Knull consumed, turning the light against itself. The All-Father's power began to wane, the golden glow flickering as the void tightened its grip. Realizing that Knull was beyond defeat by sheer force, Odin did what he had always done to preserve existence. He chose wisdom over war. With a final surge of Odin force, he shattered the battlefield itself, creating an explosion that thrust Knull back into the deepest abyss, far beyond the realms of light. The dark god did not scream, nor did he resist. He simply vanished, swallowed by the endless chasm from which he came. Odin remained standing, his breath heavy, but his will unbroken. He had not killed Knull. Perhaps Knull could never truly die. But for now, the balance was restored. He turned from the battlefield, knowing the void would always hunger, always seek to return. But so long as the All-Father lived, there would be light to challenge it. For now, the war was over. But Odin knew, in the far reaches of the abyss, Knull was waiting. The end.